Hi everyone, welcome to History on Trial. This is Dr. Tracy McCarthy, psychologist, attorney, and educator, and we are going to be looking at a historic group known as the Juda, as in the Kingdom of Judah. And we're going to be looking at a stolen legacy and the psychology of identity. We're going to be tracing the historic Kingdom of Judah from West Africa through enslavement, deportation, depopulation, ethnic cleansing, and genocide by what is known as Benin at this particular point in time. We're going to look at the transportation out of those people from the west coast of Africa and also Europe, and we're going to look at all of this in relation to the timeline for the battles of succession that were going on in both Europe and in Africa. And this discussion is going to help make sense out of the attire of little King Hifon. And you can see he's dressed in a very unusual manner for a king, a monarch, who would be on the west coast of Africa. But what we're also going to do is we're going to look at where many of these individuals ended up and who their likely descendants are today. And as usual, if this video appears on anything other than Dr. Tracy McCarthy, it is stolen and unauthorized. There is one caveat, however. If you would like to post this video on your particular channel, you can just upload the link and then it'll trace back to this particular channel, and so that would be fine. And this is just a quick recap for those of you who may not remember or may not have been here for the discussions related to this kingdom in West Africa. And so here are two maps so that you can see back in the 1700s where this kingdom was actually located on the coast of West Africa. And so there are arrows pointing, and you see the name of the kingdom underlined, and that's Juda. Sometimes it's pronounced, depending on the language, in different ways. So you might see Hueda, Whydah. So you may see a variety of spellings there, or Juida or Judah. And if you look, you can see what it's surrounded by during this time. And so you can also see the Kingdom of Benin off to the right-hand side. You see Guinea, you see Negro land up top there. You also see information related to that bite. What's also interesting is there is a river Euphrates that is to the sort of the right and also sort of north of what you see as the Kingdom of Judah. So that's very unusual, definitely noteworthy. And then you also see another notation of the Desert of Seth on the other map on the right-hand side, up sort of north and also to the right, so more east, and that's right in that area of Negro land. So that's another important notation. And we have to thank for the database information Dr. Gwendolyn Midlow Hall. This is an extensive database related to the background of over 100,000 individuals who were enslaved. It's a very searchable database, and it matches up very well in terms of confirmation with the Slave Voyages database. And so if you're looking for some cross-referencing for this particular group of people, there is great cross-referencing with that particular database that we've used quite frequently in our discussions. Okay, so we are going to tie this discussion together with the battles of succession. So that time period that you should keep in mind, and we've discussed this time period before also in terms of the deportation of people out of Europe and these battles of succession that were going on between the 1600s and the 1800s. And so you had European battles of succession, particularly in Western Europe, and you also had these Afro-European succession battles. And so there was an integration between those individuals on the west coast of Africa and Europeans, and many of the Europeans who were deported into West Africa, and then they made their way to other points around the world. So a number of dynamics were going on. You had political and ancestral issues going on, you had depopulation issues going on, you had enslavement, you had indenture, you had the deportation of people from their own land and then into other lands, and then these population transfers where people were swapped in and out, and people took on the identities of others that were not their true identities. And this actually happened in Western Europe quite a bit. So the people that were moved in, considered the peace-loving people, those individuals often took on the names and the identities of the people that they were replacing, who were sent to points west and south. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to quickly look at the depopulation and transportation of these people known as the Juda. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at who was removed, how they were removed, and where they were transplanted. Okay, so we have been discussing and tracing the history of this group, the Juda, for quite a while. And what we have come to understand is that this group was definitely involved in the transatlantic slave trade. And they were definitely traded from West Africa, in addition to Europe, into the Americas. And so we're going to look at where they ended up. For some of you who are doing your census work, this is very important information. Okay, so this is just a refresher, just in case you see these different names and you can see the spellings, these transliterations of this name, Judah or Juda or Juda. And so you can see the spelling with the W-H-Y-D-A-H and the H-U-E-D-A and the W-H-I-D-A-H, and then also a Judah with an A in front of Judah, and then Wida with the O-U-I-D-A-H, and then also with the W-H-I-D-A-W. And so you see all of these variations of this particular name, but this is the standard name that you see there with the J-U-D-A. Now, if you are doing some research and you are looking for racial categorization, you may not always find that. And so you may see listings of phenotypes, and we've talked about this before. And so this is a listing of phenotype information that you might find if you are doing this research related to this particular group of people, and also individuals in the Americas. And so you may see individuals or collectives going by different names or being given different labels based upon these phenotypes. Now, what's important to note is that in Western Europe, in those Scottish Isles, Ireland, British Isles, race was not the construct that we know it as today. And so race was really your family. And so each family or the clan, those individuals were considered a race. And so you might have for instance, the Robertson race, the Campbell race. And so you did not have these skin color race categorizations. What you did have, though, was people might be described. And so you might have the Campbells, but you might have a red Campbell and a black Campbell. So you might have these descriptors, but the race itself is the people. The race itself is that patrilineal descent in this particular instance. And so that's very important to keep in mind. And so again, some people who are doing census work right now, one of the things you'll be asked is race. And so there has been a change in that categorization. And so now people tend to think in terms of nationalities that exist now, but previously, if you have one of those Scottish, Irish, Welsh, Cornish sorts of surnames, those individuals were considered races based upon that family tie. And so you might actually belong to multiple races based upon all of these surnames in your family tree. Okay, but these are some phenotypes for you to make note of when you are reading about ancestry. And so it will help you to get a better understanding of what your ancestors potentially look like. Now, of course, this may not be all that clear cut, and a lot of it is subjective, but this does give you some sort of idea of how your ancestors might have been described. And one thing you'll note in the database is that you can actually see the transportation locations. And so you can see where people ended up or where they were sent to in the Americas. And so you've probably guessed by now that we are going to be looking at this kingdom of Judah and how they made their way to the Americas. Now, there is indication that they ended up in a number of places, India being one place, some of those Indian Ocean islands. And so there was quite a dispersion, and also it looks like South Africa. But you also have to remember that the people in South Africa were really the people in West Africa, and the people in West Africa pretty much moved them out of that position. And so those are the people who would rightfully be in West Africa, those in South Africa. So you might start to see some phenotype similarities between people in the Americas and people in South Africa, some cultural similarities, and even the naming in South Africa. Those individuals were given the same names as people in the Americas. So you see that they were noted as colored, noted as Negro, noted as Black. So you did have that variety, and you did have a similar admixture going on in South Africa that was similar to the admixture that was going on in like Jamaica, Barbados, southeastern America in terms of the United States. So anyway, here are the transportation locations. And so you can see these plantation locations that people ended up in, everything from Arkansas to, you see Concordia, you see Iberville. You see people went to Mississippi, Mobile, Alabama. You see specifically Natchez. You see people going into Orleans, that's Orleans Parish, and Chapatoulas, also Jefferson Parish. So you see a variety of places, and there are some instances where you see there is a person who has been deported and has been transported, but some of the information related to the person is missing. Now, it's unclear whether the information is actually missing or the information has been obscured. And so given the fact that there has been this weird stolen legacy dynamic going on, it might be safe to assume that some of this quote-unquote missing information is just simply obscured information, particularly since there was an indication that a large number of these enslaved individuals became lost in Pensacola. And so it appears that when they were brought over, somehow they got lost in Pensacola. Some of them were sold into slavery in Mobile, but this whole idea of them disappearing once appearing on American soil is a very interesting dynamic. And here you see the locations continued. So you see Pensacola, Florida, you see St. Bernard, you see all of these parishes. And one parish, which is really important, of course you have Orleans Parish, you have Jefferson Parish, St. Tammany Parish is really important, and you see where it included previously Washington Parish and Tangipahoa Parish. And so that's a large area that we are talking about. Now, what's interesting about that area, however, is that in St. Tammany Parish, there was a notation that there was not a lot of enslavement in St. Tammany Parish because of the landscape there, and it was difficult to keep people enslaved because of the geography in that particular area. Now, what's also noteworthy is that these places that we are talking about, this is definitely Indian territory that we are talking about, that the people were taken to. And so you have a number of these sort of southeast woodland groups that the people were transported to. So they were in that same area. Particularly you have the Choctaw, you have Chickasaw, you have the Seminoles down in there. And so you've got a variety of groups in this particular area, but this is the heavy area where a large number of people were transported during that Battle of Succession time period. And if you remember the discussion we had about the 1619 date, what was really unusual is that you really didn't see people actually arriving in the Americas, contrary to what we've been told, until the 1700s largely. And so you all of a sudden see them appear being docked in Louisiana, Mobile, Biloxi. You see that happening in the 1700s, and it coincides exactly with the battles of succession and the deportations out of Western Europe. Okay, so we are looking at the information from this Afro-Louisiana History and Genealogy database that starts in 1718 and goes through 1820. And so you have the individuals perhaps being in position prior to these documents being created, but this gives you that time frame between 1718 and 1820, just in case you are looking for your ancestors and you notice any of these names. Now, what's interesting is you have a cluster of names with Juda, and so that being the individual's name. And you can see where the individual landed, where they were transported to in the Americas. And of course, we don't have all of them because we would be going on for days and days and days listing all of the people, but you are definitely welcome to go and check out the database along with the Slave Voyages database and doing some cross-referencing there. And so you can see the individual named Juda. This is a female. And you can see there's a racial designation here as Black. Document location. So where this information is held is Orleans Parish, Tchoupitoulas, Jefferson, and you also see another one, and this is a male, Juda. You can also see who was engaged in buying and selling of human beings based upon those last names. And so you do see a number of last names that are Scottish, Irish, English. You're going to see some French also. And so again, you can see some of these locations of these documents. You see another person named Juda, female, located in Concordia. Okay, you have two additional individuals. You see both female, you see the racial designation, you see the document location for the one at the top as Wichita, you see the other location as East Baton Rouge, also includes Spanish West Florida. Again, you have another Juda. This is a female. You see the racial designation, but you also see the origin this time as Louisiana Creole. And this would be an individual who perhaps had a background, an ancestral background that was outside of the United States, and then this individual was born in the United States. And so often those individuals were referred to as Creole. And you also see down below something very similar, and you see this individual, again, Juda, racial designation is mulatto in this particular instance. Here you see an additional Juda. This location for this individual is Orleans, again, including Tchoupitoulas. You see Jefferson Parish. You again see Orleans down below for the second one. This one's very interesting, both of them are, because it has gender unidentified. And so that's particularly interesting. But again, if this is something that is of interest to you or this seems related to any of your family members, you can look this up by the buyer and seller names also and get significant information. And here you can see additional information related to the buyers and the sellers. You see full names here. You see the price that people were paying for human beings. And in this instance, this was a female, 27 years old, paid $500 for this individual's life. You see the document location listed there, and you see additional information going down. Again, you see some information for quote-unquote missing individuals, and you can see that this individual was transported to a number of locations. You see they were in Lorient, they were in Juda, they were in Grenada, and also Biloxi, Mississippi. You see the document location as Mississippi. Here you can see the name of the ship. There was some difficulty cross-referencing this particular ship and the Slave Voyages database information. What's important about this individual is now you start to get into where the person was born. And so they were enslaved and brought to the Americas, but you can see the birthplace of this particular missing individual. They were born in Juda. And here you see more of this missing identity. You see the racial categorization, you see the birthplace of the individual as Juda. And it notes that most of these slaves may have been lost at Pensacola. The rest were evidently sold at Mobile. It was landed 201 enslaved individuals. You can see here the name of the ship down at the bottom, and this cross-references very well and very accurately with the Slave Voyages database. Now there is the notation that you'll see over and over again of the trade place of embarkation being the Bight of Benin. Okay, now previously in our discussions, there was a question about whether the individuals who were deported and enslaved in Judah, whether or not they actually made it to the United States. And so you can see, tracing this Aurora ship, you can see that you go down in the middle and then down towards the bottom. You see the port they were coming out of was Juda, which is Judah, and you see that 200 landed in Louisiana. This was 1719. Again, this cross-references perfectly with the additional database that we are looking at. And these are just additional notations of additional individuals who originated in Judah. And so these were the Judah, and they were transported out. You'll notice that they, for the most part, have French surnames, French first names. And so you can see the document locations for these individuals were Iberville, Mobile, Alabama, and Orleans and Jefferson Parish. You can also make note of the dates. Again, this is very consistent with that depopulation dynamic that was going on with Europe, and also the transporting of individuals growing out of these battles of succession. Here you see some additional Judah natives, and you can see where they landed in Louisiana and also ended up in Mississippi. This is 1721 for the most part, and then you have 1791 in terms of this document creation. Again, this is consistent with that time period of the battles of succession. You can also see information in some instances of the individual's name who was involved in the slave trading. Now you have the identity of these individuals missing repeatedly. And so again, this looks like information that's pretty much obscured. So you have for the first individual, female, 1721, deported, ended up in Mississippi, coming from Judah. You have another one, male, coming from Judah, 1721, ending up in Mississippi. You have another one coming from Judah, 1721, also ending up in Mississippi. You have three additional individuals, 1721, coming from Judah and ending up in Mississippi. And Mississippi was very busy, along with Louisiana, in terms of receiving this large number of enslaved individuals from Judah. And so you see additional notations for individuals with this obscured identity going into Mississippi and then into Orleans, Chapatoulas, Jefferson Parish. This is 1721, 1728. This is right in the throes of this kingdom being overthrown, the individuals undergoing significant genocide and ethnic cleansing, and then another group actually moving into that space and taking on that identity and taking on that land. And those individuals are, that's Benin right now. And so again, you can see these notations and the dates that go along with this, and they completely coincide with the slave wages database also. And we see additional individuals, again, going into Mississippi, 1721, Mississippi, 1721. Then we have one individual going into Pensacola, 1719. And as you can see, all of these individuals, the origin is Judah. And here we go again with, of course, those individuals that there was an indication that many of them got lost in Pensacola somehow. And you see 1719, 1719, 1719, and all going into Pensacola, all coming from Judah. Again, you see additional ones coming from Judah as origin, gender unidentified. Again, there was that obscuring and also indicating that the people somehow got lost when they got to Pensacola. You see 1719 3 times. And these are not the only ones, and you can do a little bit more research on this. And you can see again going into Pensacola each time, 1719. And here you see more going into Pensacola, 1719, and then you also see a notation for Mobile, Alabama. You see additional obscured identities, 1719 coming from Judah, going into Mobile, Alabama. And here you see a mixture of 1719, 1721 coming from Judah, going into Mississippi, Alabama, and Pensacola, Florida. And again, you can get some very specific information related to the individuals who were buying and selling people. And so you can see the buyer and seller's names here. You can see the year this document was created was 1787, and also coming out of Juda, ending up in Orleans, Jefferson Parish. That's where those records are. And here's a lot more information about Rosa, the individual who was enslaved. You can see that she was 32 years old at the time, but she was born in Juda. And here you see the record of a missing individual in terms of that identity, again, coming out of Juda as the birthplace. And then you see that specific notation that for that June 1719 arrival date, most of these enslaved individuals may have been lost at Pensacola. Again, landed 201 enslaved individuals. And you don't see information related to the selling price here. You also see there was something that was important to note in these records, is that they wanted to know whether the documents involved maroons and runaways and captured runaways. And so that's important information. You can also see information related to the language that was used in that particular place where the records were found. And here you see another notation related to one of the names we were looking at. And you can see this is a French name. So you see some indications related to litigation that was related to this particular case. And you get to see more information related to where the document is located. You've got Mobile, Alabama. You have information related to the ancestry and linguistics also down below. And also, of course, you see at the top it says birthplace of this individual is Juda. And here you see an additional individual, very similar to the one that we just looked at. And again, this individual is coming from Juda. There's an interesting comment here where it identifies the person as not only coming from Juda, but identifying the person as a Catholic Juda slave. And so that's interesting to note. And here you see additional information. This is related to Henri. You see the racial classification. You see the birthplace of this individual who is male, 45 years old, and birthplace was Juda. You also see some notations related to where you can find additional information. So you have the Natchez Trace Collection. You have this information at University of Texas. And so that's important to note. This document location for this was Iberville. Here you have another individual, again, birthplace Juda. This particular individual was 25 years old at the time. You see the quote-unquote inventory value of the individual and some additional notations down below. Now, this is really interesting. You have this particular missing identity. The age category, the person is identified as nursing, and so there is no age split 00. But you also see information here that talks about the name of the ship. And again, this cross-references perfectly in terms of these databases. And so you've got the Duc de Maine or Duc de Maine, and also you see the trade place of embarkation, again, Bight of Benin. You see the arrival in Louisiana as 1721. And here you see additional information related to what looks like another infant and also coming out of Juda. And we're going to revisit the Slave Voyages database to do this confirmation. And so you can see here this ship, you see 1721 and 1719. You see the ship coming out of Ouida or Juda, and you see the principal place of slave landing as Biloxi, Mississippi, and also Louisiana. Now they don't specify exactly where in Louisiana for this one, but you have 1719 and you have 250 people coming off of this particular ship. And here's additional information related to that ship. You can see the information about the ship owner. You can see the flag that was flown. So this was a French ship. You can see the year that this ship was constructed. See information about the tonnage. You can also see the principal place of slave purchase and the principal place of slave landing. And you see that Juda, again, is the principal place of slave purchase. And you can also see that the place of landing is Biloxi, Mississippi. And here you can see additional information about the numbers in terms of the people on the ship. Another thing to note is that you see the time frame and how long this ship was traveling. So this was an extensive amount of time in terms of traveling on this particular boat. And you do see that in the transatlantic slave trade, you do see the individuals on these boats for an extensive amount of time. And here you see this ship again flying the French flag, and you can see information about where this ship went. And in this instance, this particular ship ended up in Martinique. And this is consistent because in Louisiana, in Haiti, Martinique, you do have that French-speaking dynamic going on. And so you do see that relationship between the individuals going from France to West Africa to the Americas, where speaking French was common in the colonial spaces that the people were transported to. And here's additional information related to those numbers coming out of West Africa and then going to Martinique. And this is additional information related to the captain and the crew and the number of individuals who embarked and then disembarked. And this is additional information related to people who were enslaved coming out of Juda. And this is additional slave voyages database information. And here you can see another individual coming out of the Bight of Benin. And you can see that there is missing information. They were born in Juda, and you can also see the time frame. Now, these were individuals who were on a different ship. Again, birthplace Juda, but these individuals were on a ship known as the La Diane. And again, coming out of the Bight of Benin, this time period, 1728. And you can see additional information about where people were coming from and going to. You can see individuals leaving Juda, ending up in Martinique and Haiti. You also see individuals coming out of the Bight of Benin. They say the port was unspecified, and also ending up in Haiti. Okay, and as we are wrapping up, we are going to also look very quickly at another historical cultural group that's related to the Juda that ended up in the Americas, not in the same numbers as the Juda. So you see the numbers are limited with this particular group, but the numbers do exist. And so this group is the Dan. And so as you recall, Dahomey is also Dahomey, but this specifically is for people coming from Dan and into the Americas. And here you have an individual who was born in Dan. This is a male individual. You see the racial classification. The person was 27 years old at the time. And there are other comments related to the ethnicity of the individual. And you can see that up top. Now, this is a little bit of a shift because many of the other individuals you were looking at, the records were related to French records. And now you see there is this notation of Spanish records. But again, document locations, same places. So you see going into Orleans, you see Tchoupitoulas, you see Jefferson Parish in terms of where these records are located. And here we see another individual, birthplace is Dan, coming into the United States. The individual is female. You see the racial classification. The person is 35 years old. And you can look down and see additional information related to the document location being in East Baton Rouge. This gives you some insight also, which includes West Florida, that Spanish West Florida area, and papers being indicated as being in those archives also. And this is just to give you another visual so that you can see that relationship between the Juda, Europe, Africa, and the Americas, and that time period where all of this moving around was going on, all of this depopulation, ethnic cleansing, genocide, enslavement was going on between Europe and Africa and the Americas. And so you can see the time period was 1600s through the 1800s. And so when you are looking for ancestors, you want to keep this in mind, particularly if your ancestors originated in Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, for this particular grouping that we're talking about. You also have that North Carolina dynamic where they are coming out of the Isles of Europe, and so this is all going on at the same time. So it's a very confusing dynamic and a lot of mixing with people indigenous to the Americas, coming from Africa, this kingdom of Judah, also coming from those isles. In terms of the Scottish Isles and all of that area that is over there. So you've got Ireland, you have England. And so this again is very important to keep in mind. And also, if you recall, there was that interesting dynamic where they were searching for the heir to the throne for the kingdom of Judah. And of course they found Hephon. And then there was the presentation of all of these royal things to him from Europe. So you had, England, you had France, you had them giving him his crown, giving him his scepter, giving him his throne, and these things were presented in Africa. Okay, I'm going to leave you with a legal construct in terms of understanding a significant amount of the information that we have covered, that we've been covering, and it is res ipsa loquitur. It means the thing speaks for itself. And so you can look at the data and you can extrapolate from the data and you can come away with some pretty sound conclusions about what has taken place. And so we have looked at this historical kingdom known as Judah, coming out of West Africa, being enslaved, being depopulated, just like people were depopulated in the Scottish Isles. You see this ethnic cleansing dynamic going on, and you see West Africa being involved in a little bit more than slave trading. You see basic genocide going on, and then the transportation of those individuals out of the west coast of Africa and into the Americas, very specifically into the American South. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care and see you soon.